Before we get started with this episode, I wanted to give you some exciting news that the first Wednesday of every month, there will be an introductory session presented by me for the Creighton model system, which is a system of fertility charting. This introductory session, you will leave knowing the basics of knowing how to chart your cycle, and you will learn so much about your reproductive anatomy, hormones, physiology, all the things. So many times I give this presentation to women and to couples, and they always say, why have I never known this information before? So if you are interested in signing up for this introductory session, it is just $50 to get started with this session. From there, we'll do some one-on-one coaching, get you really locked and loaded with knowing how to chart your cycle and becoming so much more empowered from there. Visit truthandfertility.com to sign up. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. I'm Haley, wife, mom, and a fertility charting instructor, here to teach you the undeniable truth about your fertility. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. Today, I have the honor of sitting down with Tori Black. She is the host of the Fruitful Fertility Podcast, and she is also in the business of helping women that are struggling with infertility and just fertility issues, and helping them find health in a more natural way, a natural space. So I'm really excited to sit down, just pick her brain about how she practices with women, how she helps women, what her podcast is all about, where her passion comes from, all of the things. So Tori, without further ado, why don't you just tell our listeners who you are, what you do, and just get right on into it.
Yeah, thanks, Haley. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so like Haley said, I'm Tori Black. I am a registered nurse. I did that for years and years and years. And then after I had children of my own, I decided I wanted to stay home. So I actually started working with a nurse practitioner, doing online work for her. And she was in the holistic fertility space, and it really blew my mind. I only knew conventional medicine, and she was teaching me all the stuff that she was doing with her clients. I'm like, I had no idea. I truly had no idea. And so I am, if you can't tell from my voice, I'm a Southern girl. I'm in Alabama, and I really wanted to I worked in Nashville at the time, and I wanted to bring that, but we had moved home to Alabama, and I wanted to bring that to where I was. I'm like, oh, this will be so good. People in my area need this so much. And I started with what was called Mercier therapy. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but it's like an actual in-person kind of treatment that helps with fertility. And, it didn't really take off where I live. And so I was like, okay, how can I support women in a way, how can I stay in this fertility space? Because I loved it so much and felt like, oh my gosh, even Haley, I know you feel this way. We have to let people know, we've got to talk to them, especially I know you're passionate about birth control pills and stuff. I'm like, I got to tell everybody what I know, because it was this secret I couldn't keep to myself. So I eventually found HTMA and mineral testing, and I loved it. And I felt like it really was the thing that was missing in the fertility space, and especially unexplained infertility. And so I got crazy and started a podcast and started mineral testing, and the rest is history.
That is awesome. Okay, there are a ton of things that I want to ask you, especially about this HTMA mineral testing, because I was looking at your website and I saw that you were doing things with that, and I have never once heard about that. So I want to talk about that, but I want to hold, because I want to. So you said that you were a nurse and you were working more in conventional medicine, and then all of a sudden you found this more natural space. What was something that obviously, you and I are, and I'm assuming most of my listeners are on this, we recognize how good the natural space is, because you're actually getting to the root cause of what is going on. Why are you experiencing infertility, or whatever the symptom is? Infertility is a symptom. It's not a diagnosis in and of itself. Amen. Right? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so what did you find going from conventional medicine to then working in the natural space? What was the main thing that you were like, oh my gosh, okay, this is the game changer, and you wanted to just pour yourself into the more natural space instead?
This sounds so silly thinking about it now. The moment for me that I was like, oh my gosh, was when I was actually in my Mercier therapy training, and learning more about cycles, learning all the stuff, kind of textbook stuff, periods and why they happen and all the stuff. But we were talking about low progesterone, and one of the people that were in my class, who's actually a good friend and colleague of mine now, but we were talking about low progesterone And I was like, well, wouldn't you just do like progesterone, like not necessarily hormone replacement, but like, wouldn't you just do hormone? You would just add progesterone back in. And she was like, yeah, but why is progesterone low in the first place? That's the question you have to ask. And I was like, okay, so
Mind
even,
blown.
yes, like I'm like, that is like, why did I not think of that? And, that was what I was like, we are missing the bigger picture. It's not like, oh, even just like moving into the natural space of like moving away from medications or treatments or procedures, but moving into like, okay, your progesterone is low. Let's use progesterone cream. And it's like, no, no, no. Let's dig even deeper. Let's look even deeper and see why it's happening in the first place. And that was really my
Exactly.
light bulb moment of like, there is something like we are doing it wrong. Like we are doing it wrong. Really.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. And I think too that that's actually a realization that I came to not too long ago as well, because you can move into the natural space of like, okay, we're moving from either the birth control pill or IVF. Now we're moving into a natural space of, okay, let's give you the bioidentical progesterone, or let's help support your cycle. But then you can go even further of being like, okay, why are you not producing that hormone in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at even further, deeper into the root of it, and then to help support your body from there. Yeah, so that's awesome. That's awesome that progesterone is what is what brought
Yes.
you into this space. That's great. Okay, so then you started to dive into this more natural space. You started the podcast, you started your business. Okay, so now you're seeing women, and I'm assuming that you're mostly working with women that are struggling with infertility. And because your podcast actually literally says unexplained infertility for Christian women, which I
Yes.
think is awesome. What is something that you typically see? Like, what is the first thing that you do with a woman who comes to you says, I have not been able to conceive for however long it is? What is the first thing that you do with them?
The first thing I do subconsciously without without like working with them is I start thinking about like how they're talking to me and the things they're saying. Like I read so much into the way people talk and what they say they're struggling with. And I'm like, okay, like especially talking about root cause, like what is causing this to happen? I look even deeper and deeper, like, are we in an unhealthy marriage? Do we have people pleasing tendencies? Do we have, I can look at someone's intake paperwork and know before I even speak to them that they are a type A perfectionist based on their answers. And so that's kind of what I think is like, if they reach out to me and they just are kind of wanting to know about working together, I'm asking them more questions and analyzing if we're a good fit, because what's going to happen is I'm going to get all up in your business. I'm not just going to ask you about your periods. I'm not just going to ask you about how long you were on birth control. I'm going to ask you, what your personality type is, what your relationship with your parents is like. I'm going to ask you a lot of weird questions. And so I really like to analyze if we're a good fit first, because I'm going to work on some deep stuff that is going to make people uncomfortable if they're expecting a traditional medical setting. Like, you're not going to come to me and me talk about your periods and your fertile window and the typical things. We are going to talk about those things because they are absolutely important, but we're going to talk about a whole lot more. So I kind of gauge if they're open to that, to digging a little bit deeper and working a little bit differently than they're used to. Like, this is not an office setting where you're going to get medications and I'm going to send you home. It is a setting where we're going to have sometimes some uncomfortable conversations.
Sure. Yeah. And I have to ask, why do you dig that deep? Like, why do you dig into relationships, whether it be your marital relationship or parental relationship? Like, what is the purpose of you digging that deep?
Yeah, well, the longer that I do this, and I've been in this space for about 7 years, the longer I do it, the more I notice there's always a deeper layer. So it was, like at the beginning, we were talking about progesterone. We went from like, okay, it's not just adding in a progesterone supplement, it's something deeper. Why are we not making progesterone? And yes, there are the foundational things like, are you eating enough? Going non-toxic and ditching like endocrine disrupting chemicals. There's all of that, but I found there was always something deeper, kind of something that was unspoken. And so the longer I do this, the more I'm like, I just realize that with each person, there's something deeper. It's not just the chemicals. It's not just that they're not eating enough protein. Those are helpful tips, but there's always something we can root out, because I've been on calls with patients and, on Zoom, and I can see them and I can read their body language. And as we're talking about things, I can tell something's not clicking, or their body language tells me something else. So I just find each person is unique, and each thing that is affecting because it really comes back to their nervous system. Something is affecting their nervous system, and what is it? And you want to say like, oh, it's busy work schedule. And sometimes it is. You want to say it's not protein, but sometimes it's because you were neglected when you were a kid, and it's just, people are like, don't want to play that game a lot of the times. But when we talk about it, even just talking about it and bringing light to it helps people kind of release that. And then all of a sudden everything else falls into place. And so it's just something that I've seen work. It's the thing that I've seen click with people. And especially the women that come to me and they're like, send me their pregnancy announcement. And I always ask like, okay, what do you think made the difference? And they usually equate it to something we did together, which is of course wonderful. They're like, oh, I think it's because we, worked on my protein and I quit skipping breakfast. But then they always say something to the effect of, I've really just surrendered this thing. I surrendered the timing to God. I surrendered this part of control, this thing they were trying to control, whether it be past trauma or people pleasing or perfectionism. And so I'm just, after you see that so many times, it's something to start looking for right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are you saying that digging that deep, I mean, there is a physical level and there's absolutely a spiritual level there too. And I think too, like you're saying, surrendering your fertility to God, like sometimes, a lot of times, actually all the time, that is a huge portion of it. Is just recognizing that children are not a right, they're a gift. And that can be really, really hard. That can be really hard to come to terms with. But you said, on a physical level, it's really affecting their nervous system when you're digging deep into these, maybe childhood trauma, or maybe, some sticky situations in your marriage or whatever that might be, that can cause an effect on your nervous system and actually be a part of the reason, or if not the reason, as to why you're experiencing infertility. Tell me more about, like, how does that actually work? Like, how can that effect on our nervous system actually cause infertility for us? Can you dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is that spiritual, emotional, mental, physical connection. So again, if we're looking at the nervous system really being the root cause, or the thing that affects everything else. So you can kind of, especially if you're in the holistic space and you've been trying to get pregnant a while, you've probably gone down a lot of different rabbit holes, like, oh, gut health, I need to work on my gut health. Oh, it's leaky gut, or it's low progesterone, so I need these progesterone creams, or whatever it is. But the more I work with people, the more I research, the more I learn, it always comes back to the nervous system. So again, we're rooting out what is causing it to be dysregulated. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I don't want to disappoint them. It's like our body. Mark Hyman is a doctor, and he made this post the other day that was so well written, but it was basically saying like, the cells in our body are listening to the thoughts we have in our head, and they respond accordingly. So while that sounds like almost silly, your nervous system is listening to the thoughts you have in your head. And if it perceives it as a threat, it will respond physically, meaning your adrenals are going to pump out more cortisol. You're going to burn through more minerals. You're going to have a physical reaction to the negative beliefs that you are carrying around. And while it's not about being positive all the time, I'm not a toxic positivity person, like just think good thoughts and it'll happen. But I do think the more that we rewire our brain, and it's a practice, just like anything else, you have to practice it. You have to call out the things, the negative beliefs you have. You have to rewire them so that your body does not respond in a certain way. So like a really good example for me, something that I have worked with a life coach, and I probably need to work on it some more, but I have a bad habit of feeling guilty when I rest. And it's this underlying belief that I'm lazy. Where that came from in my childhood, I don't know, but it's something I have, that I'm lazy. So when I rest, I feel guilty. So even though I'm sitting down, I'm having this negative thought, my nervous system is responding to it. Minerals are being depleted. I'm using up stores of minerals I need to have healthy hormones. And so there is a reaction to it. So I have to take this thought captive, and I have to say, I'm not lazy. I'm allowed to rest. Rest is biblical. God, modeled rest for us. This is something my body needs and deserves. And it takes practice. So now I am better. I'm not like perfect by any means, but now I can sit down and watch a 30-minute show and not feel guilty about it the way I used to. And so it is just this connection of your body responding. It doesn't know. I talk about bears a lot, like your body running away from bear. Our nervous system is set up to help us run away from the bear and to rest after we have reached safety. And your mind, your body does not know that negative thought you were thinking is not a bear. And so it's going to act accordingly. And so the organs in your body, all of them, are going to be affected.
Yeah, that's such a good response. And I love the bear analogy too, because you're absolutely right. Like when I teach this to my couples too, we kind of sometimes call it like a double peak effect, where peak being like around the time of your ovulation of your cycle. Well, it's possible for women, as you know, it's possible for women to have like kind of multiple peaks during a cycle. And this could be like your body revving up for ovulation, but then your body recognizes, wait a second, I'm not safe. And whether it's the bear or whether it's an argument with your husband or whether it's, an argument with your whoever, right? Your body doesn't recognize that you're safe. And so it will naturally suppress ovulation to say, right now, it's not safe for me to get pregnant. And if I ovulate, there's a potential of me getting pregnant, right? And so I feel like it's this evolutionary aspect in our bodies to kind of to wait it out, wait until we're safe again. And then your body can resume the natural process. But I just find it so interesting and really just like how the Lord created our bodies to work in this way, to make sure that we are in a safe place when we get pregnant. Like that is, and that's for the sake of the baby too. Like the baby needs a safe place. And I just find that so fascinating. So that's why I wanted to dig deeper into like, okay, why do you ask these questions? Because they are so important. It might not be the reason that you're experiencing infertility, but it absolutely could be a huge aspect of that. So I'm glad that you're also recognizing too, like, okay, there's a psychological space here, there's a biological space here, there's so much there. Now let's move back then into like the well, this was physiological because it's the nervous system, but moving out of like the mental space of it. What is something that, so minus the aspect of, how is your relationships going? How are all those things going? What are some other things that you see? Like, do you do blood? I'm sure you have them do blood work or some sort of testing to understand, okay, what could be going on with their body to be experiencing infertility. Are there some typical things that you see a lot, especially women in our day and age, that we're all experiencing endocrine disruptors, estrogens, like all of those things that are affecting our body? I feel like more women have PCOS than not at this point because we just have so much estrogen in our water, all the things. Is there something that you're seeing most commonly, or is it kind of just a drop in the hat? There's a bunch of different things that you're seeing.
Yeah, there's a few. I would say there's 3 things that I see most often. And I only work in HTMA. If a client has blood work, I'll let them send it to me. But I like HTMA so much better because, as you know, like blood is just a snapshot in time of that day. And if it's not taken on the right cycle day, then the numbers don't really tell us exactly what we're looking for.
Absolutely.
But HTMA shows us kind of what's been going on over like 3 months. So it really gives us a good overall picture of what's happening all the time, not just like in one day.
What is HTMA? Can you, this is something I've never heard of. I'm so interested.
Yeah, absolutely. It is hair tissue mineral analysis. So we take a hair sample and they analyze the minerals in it. So they analyze single level minerals, so like calcium, magnesium, sodium, those types of things. It looks at toxic metals, heavy metals, so toxic elements if you have, and this is one of the patterns I'm going to talk about, so toxic elements. And then it also looks at what we call significant ratios, just meaning like how those minerals work together and what it tells us about that. So for example, like a calcium to phosphorus ratio, how they look to like not just single, but together tells us what your nervous system is doing. And, calcium to magnesium tells me a little bit about what your blood sugar is doing. So those significant ratios tell me a lot of what's going on in the body all the time. And that's why I really love it. And so it's not quite as black and white as blood work. It is I'd say it's kind of like a puzzle. It's a little bit gray, and I have to look at your intake paperwork and ask you questions to analyze the patterns that are going on your test. But what I find most often with women looking at this test, and I love this for unexplained infertility because as you know, it's like they go to the doctor, they get their blood work done. The doctor looks at basically only estrogen and progesterone and says, oh, looks great. We have no idea what's going on. it's unexplained. But an HTMA test will show me exactly what's going on. And the patterns I see most often, and you even said it, is the water. If people are on well water or unclean, like they're not filtered water, I'll see that in the toxic element section. I've seen high levels of arsenic, high levels of mercury, and it typically comes from a contamination of the water they're using, especially well water. I used to think that like well water, I grew up on well water, and so I have like this nostalgic, like well water is the best water ever. But now our grounds are so polluted that that's not really the case. And so we really have to have those filters on, or at least check for them. They're on the EWG website. They have a water database, and you can type in your zip code, and it will give you ratings for the water specifically where you live. And for example, my brother-in-law is 42, very young. He just recently in the last few months got diagnosed with leukemia. So the first thing I did was I got on that water database, typed in his water, and there's different elements, and I can't even pronounce half of them. But one of them was 750 times the recommended amount in the water. So whatever that one was, and it'll tell you what those elements cause. And it said cancer. I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose him or tell you where his leukemia came from. But I was like, he's drinking this water that has 750 times the amount of whatever this element is in it. So a lot of times it's water. It's water because you got to think you're bathing in it, you're cooking in it, you're drinking it. So if you have contaminated water, it's really affecting the systems in your body. And just like you were talking about safety, it always comes back to safety. And I talk a lot about prioritizing too. Like, what is your body prioritizing? If your body is prioritizing getting rid of this extra arsenic and this extra aluminum that's in your water, it's not going to prioritize a pregnancy because it's too busy trying to get this out of your system, but it can't because you're getting a dose every single day. So that is one pattern I see is water that's not properly filtered. And so we see some toxic elements in there. Another one I see is what is called a calcium shell. And so basically what happens is your body is putting off so much, you're burning through so much calcium that it literally creates a shell around your cells. So this is why when someone goes in and they have their TSH drawn and the doctor's like, oh, your TSH is normal. You could be making normal amounts of thyroid hormone, but it can't get in the cell. Your body can't use it. And if we're talking about emotional and physical coming together, a lot of times with these calcium shells, I see it in people or it correlates with people who hide emotionally. So they don't say what they're thinking. They kind of stuff things down. They're afraid to say what they think. And so as we work to break that calcium shell and lower it, people become really emotional. So you actually see people will say, well, how do I know if my calcium shell's breaking? I'm like, oh, you'll be crying for no reason.
Oh my gosh.
And I actually had a call, with a group. I have a group called every second Tuesday of the month. We have a group call with my membership. And one of the girls, her husband had a calcium shell. We had done HTMA together. And she was like, and she asked that question, like, how do I know if it's working? And then she went on to say that they got in 3 fights the month before. And she's like, we never fight. And I was like, there's your proof. He's probably a little bit more emotional, a little bit more snippy because it's breaking down. And so I see calcium shells a lot, again, with like people pleasing, perfectionism. Like if you're stuffing down who you are, how you feel to people please everybody to earn affection. And these are things we're doing subconsciously. We don't really know we're doing it. But I see calcium shells a lot. Calcium shells can also correlate with birth control. So people who were on birth control for years and years and years have this copper dysregulation, and that affects calcium, and it can create a calcium shell as well. So, I don't want to get on a birth control tangent because it makes me mad. We most certainly could. But I see copper dysregulation a lot in women that were on birth control for years and years and years and years. Yeah. And then the last one I see is what's called a low NAK ratio. So a low sodium to potassium ratio. And this is that burnt out ratio is what I call it. We call it the vitality ratio. And basically what it shows me is that your thyroid is having a hard time keeping up. Your adrenals are having a hard time keeping up because you are so burnt out. Your nervous system has been running away from this bear for so long that now it has shut everything down in order to keep you safe. And we have to replace those minerals so that your body can actually function the way it's supposed to. It can actually feel safe and have the energy to do the things it's supposed to do. So I really see water contamination, calcium shells, and burnt out patterns mostly.
Wow. And these are three things that I have. I mean, the water, maybe, yes, I've heard, but the other two, especially the calcium thing. I mean, I have never once heard about that. Is that caused just by eating too much calcium, eating and drinking too, like how does that happen?
Not typically. Not typically. I don't know that I've ever worked with someone that had a calcium shell, and it was because they were, I mean, you would have to be eating like a crap load of
Yeah,
calcium and
yeah.
dairy.
So what
So
typically causes that?
the copper dysregulation,
Oh, right, right, right,
because they
right.
work hand in hand. Yep. So years and years of birth control, again, the emotional hiding. But really what I hate to say stress because that's kind of a boring answer, but what happens is, let's say that we have, a healthy level, and as you're stressed from different things, you start to lose minerals. So it looks high on a test because you're actively losing it. It's actually coming out of your hair at a faster rate. So we see that with stress. So people, again, if they're like emotionally hiding, so let's say it's someone who's working in an unhealthy work environment where, they're people pleasing, they're doing more work than they should. It's causing fights at home because they won't clock out and come home. We might see a calcium shell there. And again, it's different for everybody because like, what is the thing that's dysregulating your nervous system, causing you to feel stressed and causing you to lose minerals at a high rate?
Okay. All right, gotcha. So what is the next step then? Because a lot of the times, I mean, we can filter our water and we
Okay.
can try to find low stress activities, but some
Mhm.
some people do just have more stressful lives and some of those things are out of their control. So where do you start with kind of detoxifying in those areas? What is kind of your first step?
It's different for each person, because as we can go through the basics. Like, of course, I'm going to talk to them about like making sure they're eating enough calories because typically, as women, we think we eat too much. Like we have this like, oh, I don't want to gain weight, so I don't want to eat too much. But I see a lot of times my clients are not eating enough calories. Another number one culprit I see is skipping breakfast and going straight to coffee. So they're waking up early for a long work day. They're not putting any protein on their stomach and then they're dumping caffeine on it. And I get it. I love coffee and I used to actually drink coffee till I was nauseous. Like I would not eat breakfast and drink coffee till I was nauseous. And when I was nauseous, I would stop. And what kind of sense does that make? I don't know. But that's just like we get into patterns and that's what we do. So I kind of go through the normal things like nutrition, sleep. Like, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating enough? Are you eating breakfast? So especially like the women that do intermittent fasting, they were doing intermittent fasting because they wanted to lose weight. I don't like to mess with people's diets too much. I'm not a dietitian, so I don't like to touch too much, but I usually challenge them to try eating breakfast every morning for a month. And if they don't feel any better, they can go back to intermittent fasting, but they always feel better by eating breakfast. So making sure we're getting enough calories, making sure we're getting enough protein, the things like you said, water, sleep, kind of those foundations we know we need to do, movement. But again, it goes back to what is the thing that is I talk about soundtracks, but like what is the soundtrack they're playing in their mind? Is it that they believe their body is broken? And so every month they're having these negative thoughts about like, well, I'll never get pregnant because I have PCOS or I have endometriosis, or my doctor said I only had, a 0.5 chance of getting pregnant naturally. What is the soundtrack that's playing in their mind? And sometimes we don't even realize it till you actually take that time to capture your thought, like take it captive and figure out why you feel that way. I had a client, so sweet, so precious. And like we started talking about her family dynamic, and she said that her parents fought a lot. She was always the mediator, she was the middle child, so we talked about that, like not having to be a mediator and like how that has shown up in her life now. Like, what does that look like now? Are you doing that at work? Are you still the mediator? Like, are you drawing healthy boundaries around the things they're saying to you or what they're asking you to do? So it really goes back to these things that seem non-fertility related. I mean, there are the foundations. Are you eating enough? All that. But typically I'm trying to root out that one kind of red flag that I see.
Yeah. And when you start to detoxify, you start to dig deeper into your relationships and find healing from that, right? Even if you can't control the situation, you can at least let go of the
Mhm.
situation, right? And just give it to the Lord and receive healing from that. Once a woman is starting on that process, what is the maybe not, if you have a percentage, that'd be great. But what is the typical, I mean, do women, is that typically what they need, just to be eating healthier, to detoxify, to really focus on just giving up control sometimes in those areas and relationships? Are those really the three things that you're seeing like make the difference? Like, what is the percentage really of women that makes a difference and they're able to conceive versus women that do need more, just more help from there, whether it be, medication, sometimes even surgery, further testing and
Yeah,
things
I
like
would
that.
say if I could boil it down, the three things that I'm really focusing on with my clients, and especially the ones that are getting pregnant are the ones that take this seriously and step into it, but is nervous system regulation, minerals, putting minerals back in that you're losing, and then surrender. So that's the spiritual aspect of like surrendering it to God, which really ties into the nervous system regulation and minerals. Like really, they
Right.
all affect each other. And I don't have a percentage. I love numbers and I love data. And so when I originally started, I would try to keep a percentage of like how many people I was working with that were getting pregnant. But some people don't stick to the plan. Some people fall off. And so then I felt like, well, are my numbers accurate? Or are they not accurate? Or, and I just got stickler. But what I did start keeping a track of is the women that get pregnant, how soon they get pregnant on
Okay.
average. And every person I've had that got pregnant using this um, system that I use now with like HTMA and like rooting out those things is the average is 3 months.
Wow.
And these are women that have been trying to get pregnant for years. Most of my clients come to me with unexplained infertility specifically, and they have been trying for at least 2 years, almost always. So I don't have like the people that are like, oh, I've been trying for 6 months. I have people, I mean, I had a client actually named Haley who was on the podcast. She'd been trying for 5 years, and then we worked
Wow.
together and she was pregnant in 5 months. So,
That's
I mean, it's
amazing.
really, yeah. And I do tell them, like you're talking about surgery and stuff, I do tell them, like, we do have to address the physical things. We do have to address, like, if you have endometriosis, if you have polyps, if you have blocked tubes, because no amount of nervous system regulation is, I call it a roadblock. Like you can't drive past the tree in the road if you're just because you're rewiring your thoughts. We do have to remove the tree. So that is an important piece. And I do like to make sure that like everyone knows that and that I'm aware that
There's
like,
a time and place for
yes,
that, but
absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, but on average, my clients are getting pregnant in 3 months and the majority of them in less than a year. I mean, even the ones that are on the longer end are like 7 months and 9 months.
wow. But those are the ones that are taking it seriously, right? And they're
Yes.
doing the things that you're telling them to do. Yeah, yeah. That is amazing, though. I mean, that truly is amazing because, in my space, teaching Creighton and working more in the NAPRO technology space, you know, as far as I know, we don't go necessarily this deep on the level of looking at minerals and looking at, I mean, yes, we are looking at toxins, but minerals specifically. And we're more looking at blood work, ultrasound, and then
Mhm.
medication or surgery going from there. And again, there is absolutely a time and a place for that, especially with extreme endometriosis, PCOS, all of those things. But sometimes it really just is that quick fix of diet or of,
Mhm.
getting your minerals right and getting those ratios correct and de-stressing that. And in the infertility is a stressor, obviously, in and of
Yes.
itself. So it's really hard when you're struggling with infertility to be like, okay, well, let's lower your stress. Well, and so that's a really, really difficult thing. But I think, going into the faith side of things, surrendering it, just giving it to the
Mhm.
Lord. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not there anymore. Of course, it's still there, but you're not the one in control of that. And
Mhm.
that can be a scary thought, but that can actually be a healing thought too. Now,
Yes.
I can't interview you without talking about fertility charting. And I just to let the listeners know. So Tori actually just put out a podcast episode on fertility charting and why she actually sometimes recommends that couples put away fertility charting for a little bit. And everything she said, I was like, yes, that makes so much sense. So Tori, I want you to go into, okay, how do you recommend fertility charting for your clients? When do you tell them, okay, enough is enough? Like what is your typical way that you work with clients on a fertility charting aspect?
Yeah, so I do love the science and the knowledge you can gain about what's going on in your body based on your cycle. I think it's like truly amazing. And so what I'd like for my clients to do, and especially like someone who's brand new, has never cycle charted before, like we need to talk about how to do it, the correct way to do it, and what it tells you. And it's so funny because I was on birth control for so many years. I mean, years and years and years and years, and had never heard the term cervical mucus, like didn't know, I was just sitting there thinking like, well, I don't know what this white stuff in my underwear is. I just must be a weirdo. Like no one talks about it. And then especially being on birth control and not really seeing those signs. I have a friend who I call her my woohoo friend. Like, like she's just this whimsical, wild, wonderful person. And I remember her talking about how she knew when she ovulated because she could feel it. And I thought, you are crazy. You've always been crazy. You're still crazy. Like, you cannot tell when you ovulate, And then, you know, in my 20s, I come off birth control and I start cycle charting and I'm like, I know exactly when I ovulate. I know exactly when I ovulate. And it's like, okay, it really isn't crazy. But I really like for people to have that realization of like, oh, this is what my body is telling me. And I deal in everything I do almost, like whether it's cycle charting or mineral balancing or anything, I always say you got to give it 90 days. So I really like for people to chart their cycle for 3 months. One, because I feel like that's the perfect amount of time to really get a grip on what it's telling, like get in the habit of doing it and understand it. And then you also have 3 months to compare. So you can, because it's really not like the day to day that you really want to analyze. You want to look at this month next to this month next to this month and see what's working and how things are trending. So I tell everyone 3 months, do it for 3 months till you've got the hang of it. And then I usually challenge them to take 3 months off, and if you want to make note of like cervical mucus, I love that, but like no strips, because I feel like the strips are what really like people get really obsessed with. And I used to
Yes. Yeah.
recommend the Aneto all the time, and I still think it's such a really cool tool. And I loved it as a practitioner. Like, yes, let me see your numbers because I love the data. But then I found like my clients were becoming so obsessed with it that they weren't really seeing the bigger picture of what we were doing. So we would talk about like, hey, we need to work on these things specifically based on your test. But then every time they talked to me, they wanted me to analyze their Aneto chart or their strips. And I'm like, girl, just like, don't worry about that right now. Like you're kind of missing the picture. We're talking about nervous system regulation and you're obsessing over these strips, which I totally understand is hard to do. Like you want a baby, you want to make sure you don't miss a day. You want to know what the numbers mean. You want to understand what's going on because nobody in the medical field has helped you understand what's going on. They just gave you that label of unexplained infertility and then sent you on your way. So I truly do understand and empathize with the wanting to understand and know. But when after you sent me 3 or 4 charts and you're not addressing any of the things I told you to work on, then it's time we have to put it down. And some women, like, it really does come down to personality sometimes, because I worked with a girl who was a data analysis. That was her job. And so she loved numbers. And so she enjoyed it. And it wasn't this stressful thing to her. It's just something she actually enjoyed because that was part of her personality. And then I have clients that like it overwhelms them. And I just have to very lovingly say, you're put that down. Don't use that anymore. Don't buy any more strips. Don't buy any more. And they'll say, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, I think you should quit using those strips. I think you should quit using that Aneto. And so again, if it's always coming down to nervous system regulation, you have to look at cycle charting as, do I feel empowered or do I feel overwhelmed? And then for me too, because I'm a minimalist at heart, like in everything I do, I'm a minimalist. But I can cycle chart or chart, cycle chart and look at my symptoms and never use a strip and know exactly when my fertile window is. So I'm like, it's kind of like using a GPS to get somewhere. You need it the first time or two, and then after that, you need to drive that way without using your GPS, so you actually know how to do it. So it's kind of the same thing. I like for them to know, get the foundation, and then analyze how it makes them feel, if they're empowered or overwhelmed, and put it down after that. And even just taking 3 months off, so that if you want to do it again 3 months after that, like that's kind of my mentality. 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off.
Yeah. And I really do love that advice too, because fertility charting, it is data collection. That's what I tell a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my clients. Like, we are collecting data to understand what is going on with your cycle. And just your chart alone can show us so much about hormonal imbalances. It could help us, I say us, I'm not the doctor, but it can help a doctor diagnose properly and then
Mm-hmm.
treat you properly from there, right? So there's it is an incredible data and data analysis tool, but I think it can very quickly go from collecting data to how do I control my fertility so that I can get that baby in my arms.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, and I, it's funny, I've actually been there. And the reason the story that comes up in my head when you say this is actually when my oldest is 5 and I have PCOS. So, and I was diagnosed with that way even before I met my husband. And when we were trying to conceive him, it was, if in the long run, it took like 7 months. And I fully recognize that that is not a long time for the majority of people. But when you're in the thick of it, it is really difficult because you don't know how long
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be. And my chart became my control. Like it was the only thing that I had to control the situation. And I remember it was probably about 6 months in to trying. And I remember the doctor I was working with legit told me, you need to put down your chart for a month. Like you need, because he could just tell like you're getting a little, he didn't say this. He was like, you're getting a little crazy with it. And my husband, I looked at my husband and I was kind of shocked. I was like, this is data. Like, don't you need this data? Like, don't you need this to recognize like what's happening? And I look at my husband like, do you hear him? And my husband actually was just, I could tell by his face that he was in agreement with the doctor. And so I remember going back in the car, just kind of like huffing. And I'm like, how dare he tell me to put down this chart? And my husband goes, okay, if you won't do it for a month, how about just 2 weeks? Can we just drop it for two? Because I didn't realize even how much stress it was causing him. And so I was like, okay, we'll compromise 2 weeks and then I'm picking it back up. I kid you not, in those 2 weeks is when we conceived my son. Like that is, and that's not everybody's story. And I recognize that. But it was for me on a physical level, de-stressing because that chart can become that stressor that affects your nervous system that then, delays ovulation or affects your body and affects your fertility. But on a spiritual level, it was really a practice of the Lord being like, this baby is a gift. It is not something you have control over. And he needed me to give him that in order to then say, okay, now your heart is ready, and I'm very type A control freak. Like I am that, like if I were your client, I would be that client. Like, look at my numbers, look at, and so I do have that personality. So I totally wholeheartedly agree with you that I think charting is a very, very, very helpful tool. It is sometimes necessary in order to understand what's going on with your body to get proper diagnosis. But when it starts to transition then into that control, put it down. Put it down. Like that is a sign that you're not using it in the way that it's meant to be used. So I am like 100% with you there. Now we've been talking, about giving things to the Lord as well and more on the faith aspect of it. So kind of to wrap up here, I wanted to ask you, your tagline is unexplained infertility for Christian women. So tell me a little bit about that and like how you bring faith into your practice. Do you only see Christian women or like what does that look like in your practice of bringing faith in the aspect into that?
Yeah, so I would work with anyone, even if they weren't Christian, but obviously that is who is drawn to me and who I really enjoy working with because I believe putting that surrender and putting it back in God's hand, like we were talking about, is tied to our nervous system, is tied to the physical things that affect our fertility. And we can't ignore that fact. I also think like what I feel called to do in the fertility space is to be that encourager and that cheerleader that the medical system is not. So, the medical system is this very data-driven, I call it sterile, cold. Here are your chances of getting pregnant. And everybody wants to tell you why you won't get pregnant. You have PCOS, so you probably won't get pregnant. You have endometriosis, so it's not likely that you'll get pregnant. It's like, you could go in there healthy as a horse and they would find or something and be like, you probably need IVF. And it blows my mind. And so when I first started, I kind of felt like, well, I don't want to promise people that they'll get pregnant. Like I don't want to promise them that and then be disappointed. And then I felt like God was calling me to change that mindset of like, okay, it's not about me. I'm not the one getting anybody pregnant. God is, you know? And so it's like putting your faith back in him. You can have hope and you can feel encouraged. And, you know, I'm here to help you believe that you are called to be a mother because God said so, not because I have a perfect plan or I'm the smartest person in the world. Like, I don't even like being called a fertility expert because I'm like, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. There's plenty of stuff I don't know. But I do know that if God has put that calling on your heart and you talk to him about it, and that sounds so silly, but if you talk to him about it, he will talk back to you. He will make you that promise or confirm that for you. And when you have that hope and that stability on a foundation that is bigger than you, it changes the way you look at life. It changes the way you look at your health. It changes the way you go through your fertility journey. And so I think we always have to bring it back to that. Like you were saying, like, we're not in control anyways. And there's little things we want to try to control. But at the end of the day, God has a plan. God has a story. And we might have to accept the fact that it doesn't look the way that we want it to. And I haven't heard that about, like, you know, a child is a gift, not, what do you say, a privilege, or like
a child's a gift, not a right.
A right. There you go. A right.
Yeah.
Like, that was so good. I'm like, ooh, that's a sticker, you know, because
steal it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if God, and I truly believe, you know, the women listening to this are called to be mothers, and that will happen. And again, I feel like that is what I am called to preach, that God is bigger than any diagnosis that you have, any doubt that you have. God is bigger than that, and put your faith in that. But I also, at the same time, believe that letting go of the fact that you may not be a mother in the way that you wanted to be is also the thing that's going to help you get pregnant. So it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but if you step into what God has called you to do right here, right now, and I often say you're not waiting, you're in a season of preparation. And how are you preparing? Are you preparing by thinking you're not good enough, thinking negative thoughts, hiding in a corner, when there's a God who made you, knows you, has good plans for you? It's like, when we step into that, it just, to me, it's the root. Like, we talk about root cause all the time, but for me as a Christian woman, like, that's the root. Like, do you believe that God is bigger than anything you're facing in the real world? And if we don't address that, if I can't bring him in, then in a lot of ways, I don't know how to help you. Because, like, if our faith is only in what we can do and what we can achieve, that would be so sad. Like, I was actually joking with someone the other day, like, thank the Lord that he has a better plan than me, because, or all of us, like, if we were the authors of our stories, we would all be married to that, like, dumb boy that we dated in high school that didn't treat us right. You know, that's where we would be if we got to write the story. But when we allow God to take the pen, it's going to turn out more beautiful than we ever expected, but we will miss it if we are trying to do everything in our own striving, in our own power. So I just think it just really stays all connected of, like, the only way to overcome these negative thoughts, these negative beliefs, these physical problems you're facing is to take it back to God and rest in him and his peace.
Amen. Yeah. And I really think too, that when you are in this work, you can't do it without the Lord. Like, I'm not going to be the one to get you pregnant. You're not going to be the one to get them pregnant. I mean, God made us physical beings. So there is a physical aspect to these, of course. Right. And God calls people like you and me to help women with the physiological side, to help them, you know, prepare their body the best way that they can. But if we're missing that aspect of, this is actually a gift, your body is a gift that the Lord gave you, right? And so he brings people to people that are going to help them, and that's how we're the body of Christ. But if we forget the Lord in all of this, we're forgetting the gifter of the gift, right? Yes. Like, we are forgetting that vital aspect. So I'm so grateful that you bring a faith lens into this, because it's 100% necessary. You have to, you really have to. Tori, I thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really blessed to be able to talk with you. For anybody that's listening that wants to get in contact with you, wants to start working with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can go to fruitfulfertilityco.com, so co.com. I have information on services there. You can find me at the Fruitful Fertility Co podcast on Apple or Spotify, or you can just jump right in my DMs on Instagram, which is also Fruitful Fertility Co.
Awesome. Thanks, Tori. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Haley.
Thanks for listening to the Truth and Fertility podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please leave a 5-star review. That helps me tremendously. For more information about learning to chart your fertility cycle, you can visit truthandfertility.com, and I'll talk to you guys again next week.